Okay, here's one worthy of a suit and tie and a blackboard. But this is what you got. So, what I want to talk about is zero, the concept of zero. So, right, we're getting deepity here now. But so 40 years ago, I learned about zero and relative zero and absolute zero because inside of measurement scales are absolute zeros or relative zeros. Now, a good example of that is temperature. Both Celsius and Fahrenheit go to a zero. Zero in Celsius is the freezing point of water, or 32 point something degrees. Zero Fahrenheit is 32 degrees. Well, I'm sorry, zero centigrade is 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So you can do a translation there. But they both have zeros, but they're not the same zeros. So that is a relative zero. It's relative to what you're measuring. And both scales were set up for different reasons by different people. So there's a little bit about zero, right? So the absolute zero, now you have to go to a temperature scale like Kelvin. And if you go into pressures, you go into things like bar and atmospheres and pounds per square inch. But barometric pressure is a relative pressure, right? It's a change in pressure. So, or it's the pressure on us from the air around us that creates the little bit of buoyancy air gives us. All right, so zeros. Really tough here. I'm trying to stick to zeros and I keep coming up with numbers. But here's where it got tricky. Okay, so you can think about 0 degrees being cold, minus 700 Fahrenheit or whatever the number is for 0 Kelvin, whatever that translation would be. So this zero thing gets really tough when you get it at the true boundaries of nothing, right? So if you have an absolute zero, means there's no temperature at all. It's so cold that there's no such thing as a temperature. Is that possible? So zero, I mean, logically in your mind, it doesn't exist. You just can't have something not possible. And you go to our energy equations, right? And conservation of energy and mass and all of that. And can something weigh zero? Can you have absolute zero? Yes, you can take the box off the scale and it says zero, but can you take the atom off the scale? Can you take that very last atom off the scale and now the scale is truly measuring nothing? Well, if you want to take the atoms off, you can't have any atmospheric pressure to hold the atoms, and you can't have any temperature because temperature is energy. And so how does that zero, that absolute zero exist? So you're truly trying to get on the other side of something, or you're trying to get into something that we don't fully understand. It's what has drawn us into the subatomic levels and, these strange things that you hear about that at subatomic, the spooky interactions. And by the word spooky, that is not a supernatural spooky. That is make your spine shiver spooky, So this absolute zero thing, comprehending it is tough. And the reason it got tough is trying to get to that absolute zero. Because all of our equipment, now remember, I've got energy measurements in my pocket. I've got pressure measurements in my pocket. I've got temperature measurements in my pocket. So the toolbox is, it's got some weight to it. And each one of those things individually has a zero. You can kind of picture, I have 0 pounds of something. Well, I'm going to get as close to zero as I possibly can. But if the scale says 0.00, then I've got to be happy with the scale and hope it's right. So absolute zero, what is it? Absolute zero is the other side of the Big Bang. The answer is we don't know. We don't know. There could be a God on the other side of that. That's where the idea of God for me is, because it's an idea, right? I own these things. They're my words, how I understand them and use them publicly. So that absolute zero is a very, very hard concept to put into anything. And I mentioned elsewhere jokingly, you can't divide by zero. Now, you're going to give yourself an answer of zero because it just makes sense. If you don't have anything, how can you have something? But in the rules of math, divide by zero is a null result. It's no result. It's absolutely nothing. And a null is 0, 0, in case you were wondering. That's a null character. Not a blank. A blank is a 2, 0, I think. So zeros, absolute zeros, can just absolutely confuse you. It's the supernatural. It is when you get to that boundary, you can start talking about quarks and about spooky matter and about electrons disappearing and somehow ties that aren't physical as humans understand physical to other things that we still don't understand. So the answer is, I don't know. There's a lot of words I could stick in there, mostly pejoratives, I goddamn don't know. I really don't know. I truly don't have an answer for you. But we can go think about it. And if we're really serious, maybe we can find an answer and win a prize. There's always door prizes. So absolute zero is one of the hardest concepts to get to. You begin to go into, calculus and summation equations for multivariate analysis to find out, was it really zero to begin with? But in all these measurements, gently over time, over the billions of years we've had to get here, it just fell into place that what we call the vacuum of space isn't truly a vacuum. It really never can be because of that absolute zero idea. At some level, absolute zero could exist. We don't understand what that even means, and we're trying, but we don't know. So out in space, the particles become further and further apart. And the higher density particles, like elements, molecules, are very much affected by gravitational pulls. Everything is, but it's how much they're affected, right? The higher the mass, the more gravity affects. We're into equations we don't fully understand, touching at the edges of zeros. So these absolutes, when people posit them, are marginally garbage. What an absolute is to me is an equation I can't understand. It's concepts that aren't available to me to be able to piece together. But the opportunity is there to help define that. Just like the word gravity is what it is. There is no doubt in any educated person's mind what gravity is. I'm absolutely positive about that. So I do try to keep these short. If you want to go into absolute scales, each one of them is, I want to say 4 weeks of your time. This is what it would take to step through half of what I don't know and would miss in trying to explain something like that. We are bodies of knowledge, each one of us. That's what makes us special. The body carrying us around is an artifact of time. So grow old with me. It'll be fun.